let it play, boy.
Napoleon Bonaparte kept the whole of Europe in fear for more than a decade. And although the Napoleonic Wars were predominantly a land conflict, many of his political and military decisions were informed by the dominance of the British fleet at sea, and the naval actions that were fought earlier in the war. Among them was the last great sea battle fought under sail, the Battle of Trafalgar. French victories at Marengo and Hohenlinden in 1800 forced Austria to sue for a separate peace, leaving the United Kingdom as the leading member of the Second Coalition. Napoleon's forces dominated on land, so the only way for the United Kingdom to continue the war was via naval actions. The British Navy was blockading France from receiving foreign goods, and in turn forced Prussia, Russia, Denmark and Sweden to ally against Britain to defend the trading routes. While the Russian Navy was in its winter harbours, the British attacked Copenhagen in 1801 and forced Denmark to leave the alliance. When the Russian Tsar Paul I died a month later, his heir, Alexander I, was more lenient towards the United Kingdom, and the anti-British Union ceased to exist. France had its share of problems. One of its colonies, Haiti, had revolted in 1791. Napoleon decided to send an expeditionary force to restore French rule over the island and its lucrative sugar industry in late 1801. The British fleet chased the expedition across the Atlantic Ocean, the island was blockaded, and the French received no supplies or reinforcements. It was clear that neither side could strike the final blow, and a peace treaty was signed in March of 1802 at Amiens. The British promised to return the French colonies and leave Malta and Egypt, while Napoleon had to rescind control of Naples and the Papal States. For the first time in a decade, Europe was at peace. Napoleon sent a new expedition to Haiti, but it failed. Holding on to the colonies proved to be extremely difficult, so in April of 1803, the vast territory of Louisiana was sold to the United States. The Haitian expedition, and the fact that Napoleon was asserting control over Switzerland, was worrisome for the United Kingdom. On the other hand, the French demands for Britain to leave Malta and Egypt were left unheeded. Napoleon started preparing a new force at Boulogne to invade the British Isles, but it was the United Kingdom who declared the war that would be later known as the War of the Third Coalition in May of 1803. Napoleon was not expecting the renewal of hostilities, and his fleet was scattered across various harbours, with 21 ships of the line in Brest, 12 in Toulon, and 9 more in the Atlantic. The superior British Navy blockaded both ports. Napoleon developed a plan in the summer of 1804. One of his fleets needed to break the blockade, move into the open sea, then attack the part of the English Navy blockading another harbour and unite with the portion of the French fleet stationed there. That would have allowed the French to get the army at Boulogne across the English Channel. The situation changed for the better for the French in October when the British sunk some Spanish vessels. This provoked Spain to declare war on the United Kingdom and ally itself to France in December. Napoleon now had the numbers to implement his plan. In late March of 1805, the French commander at Toulon, Vice Admiral Pierre Villeneuve, ordered his fleet to sail out. He managed to evade the loose blockade set by British commander Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson. It seems that the British commanders were sure that Napoleon would try to land a force in Italy, so the majority of Nelson's vessels were around Sardinia. However, Villeneuve was implementing Napoleon's plan. He passed the Straits of Gibraltar in early April, was joined by some Spanish ships, and continued towards the Caribbean. Nelson got this intelligence only in late April and started his pursuit across the Atlantic. The French arrived at the Caribbean Sea basin in May and captured a few British outposts. Nelson reached the area in June, but was still one step behind Villeneuve. Despite that, the French weren't able to inflict much damage to the local British colonies and started moving back to Europe, arriving in the second half of July. A smaller British fleet under Vice Admiral Calder was ordered to stop Villeneuve, but the subsequent battle near Cape Finisterre was indecisive. Still, this encounter prevented the French from reaching Brest to lift the blockade, and they returned to Cadiz. At the same time, Austria and Russia joined the Third Coalition, and Napoleon had to march his army stationed in Boulogne to the east, which meant that the invasion of the British Isles was postponed. Nelson was appointed the overall commander of the Royal Navy, and as the allied French-Spanish Armada concentrated in Cadiz, he sent the majority of his fleet off the coast of France to block Villeneuve. By the end of September, he joined the fleet personally. Villeneuve received an order from Napoleon to move towards Italy, but ignored it. On the 18th of October, the French commander received a new order to stay in Cadiz and wait for his replacement. Once again, the order was neglected, and the Allied fleet went to sea on the 20th. On the 21st, Villeneuve's navy was getting close to the Straits of Gibraltar. Nelson allowed the French to move as far away from Cadiz as possible to prevent them from retreating. However, by dawn the British vessels were detected. Villeneuve didn't expect Nelson's navy to be so strong, so he ordered his ships back to the harbour. This manoeuvre failed due to lack of training, and the Allied fleet ended up with an incoherent line. The usual tactic of the age was to approach a foe and enter a shooting match, so the fate of the battle was decided by the quality of the ships, crew training, and sheer luck. Instead, Nelson divided his fleet into two halves to attack the Allies broadside. He was personally leading the northern group that had 13 ships of the line, with his flagship Victory in front, while Vice Admiral Collingwood's squadron of 14 ships of the line was to the south, led by the flagship Royal Sovereign. By midday, the distance between the two navies was just 5 kilometers. They were off the coast of Cape Trafalgar, and Nelson issued his famous order. England expects that every man will do his duty. Royal Sovereign was recently repaired and was faster than most ships, so the wind moved it dangerously close to the enemy line, while the other ships in the squadron were lagging behind. At 12:20, Royal Sovereign fired the first volley upon Santa Ana and Forgo, and these vessels shot back. Collingwood's flagship was attacked by 4 enemy ships. Only 15 minutes later, Belle Isle arrived and covered the right board of Royal Sovereign. More English vessels moved into the fray and tried to cut the Allied line, but Collingwood was outnumbered at the initial point of contact. Still, the positioning of the Allied navy didn't allow its second-line ships to assist, and by 1400 the majority of the first-line vessels were either sunk or surrendered. To the north, Nelson's squadron got close to the enemy line by 1220, but the wind was calming, and that made Nelson's ships a very slow target. His refusal to fight using traditional line tactics was detrimental at this point of the battle, as none of his ships were able to shoot, while the enemy was sending volley after volley. Despite casualties, the flagship Victory was moving forward. Nelson ordered a fake maneuver to make the enemy think that his ships would form up in a line, but instead he then ordered one more turn, and Victory ended up between the French flagship Boquenteur and the smaller Redoutable. This allowed Nelson's ship to use the guns on both sides. The French ships needed to turn, and Victory used that to take Boquenteur out of the game. However, Victory itself was taking massive damage from Redoutable. The French ship was also using sharpshooters, and at 13:15 one of their shots wounded Nelson. It was clear that this wound was deadly. Redoutable's crew attempted to board Victory, but the British managed to stop them. Victory was soon reinforced by Temeraire, which moved across Redoutable's left board and started shooting, and by 1420 Redoutable was captured by the crew of Temeraire. To the north, British Neptune entered into a battle with Spanish Santísima Trinidad and managed to take it out of the fight. By 1400 it was becoming clear for Villeneuve that he was losing the battle, and he ordered the northern portion of his line to move to the southwest and collapse on the British fleet. However, the captains of these ships failed to see the signal, and this became the final mistake of the Allied fleet. Villeneuve's Boquenteur was in no shape to continue fighting, and soon he surrendered. By the time the remaining 10 Allied ships started their move to assist, most of the vessels in the centre were either sunk or captured. Collingwood took overall command of the British Navy and ordered Nelson's squadron to intercept the French reinforcements. The remaining Allied ships decided to retreat. It was a complete victory, with the British capturing 18 enemy ships. Nelson passed away as soon as he heard the news of the victory. The French defeat at Trafalgar confirmed the naval dominance of the United Kingdom, and meant that Napoleon would not be able to invade Britain. But while the battle was raging at sea, the Emperor's Grand Army was moving into Germany against the Allied Austrian and Russian armies.
Like 4,000 BC. Or like earlier than that.
Okay. Well, yeah, right. We've been in interaction with Europeans in terms of warfare for a very long time. Taking it back to as early as 122. Has everyone heard of 6th of December? Yeah. Right. So we all know Haitian war where you have their names and you say, I was here. And these are Africans who represent the Roman Empire and take part in warfare in this country. They were able to dispel the Visigoths from that area of there over 700 years. So again, that's another form of warfare that we don't really get to talk about in British history. So what I'm going to do is take us back. I'm going to talk about some empires in the African continent that were taken over by Europeans and link that into how we were taken, colonized, and then brought into their personal their armies and their regiments. So through their warfare, they were able to take armies and use them for their warfare, which then kind of ties our histories in together. So I'm going to go back to the Ashanti. Anyone know the Ashanti? Anyone know anything about it?
Have like what is it? The Golden Stool.
Yeah. Anyone else? So the Ashanti Kingdom was linked in with the Akan Empire. Their first king was in 1670 and he ruled up to 1770. His name was Hussein Tutu. They had an invasion in Kumasi, if you heard of Kumasi now, and that was the capital at the time. They were invaded by
read Trans-Siberian book, Destruction of Black Civilization. It talks about all this stuff like Chinese Empire, the Mosley, Angola and Singapore, so he covers all that. So I've read like briefly about it. So I know the name means about it. But I'll come to learn a bit more about it.
Okay, yeah, they were very good creatures. They had very, very good civilization framework. They had another neighbouring African kingdom called Songhai, which was again another powerhouse within Africa. So while Europeans were having their dark ages, we had Africa having a golden age, movement in economics, architecture, culture, and many more. So from 1328 to 1998, we have been a conflict between ourselves and Songhai. And that area, the Mossi area, was not conquered until 1897 by the French. So it took years for them to finally penetrate their walls and to actually get within their walls and colonize them. So that's why we've got the difference between British-speaking areas and French-speaking areas. So that modern day Burkina Faso would have been colonized by the French, which is why they would be called into the French regiments in the later wars. The next one is the Zulu Wars. You've heard of the Zulu Wars? Right. So this is in the KwaZulu nasal area, modern day South Africa. And I know we all know about Shaka Zulu. Yeah. So what fun facts do you know about Shaka Zulu? Yeah, he was a literal warrior. If you want to think of an African warrior, Shaka Zulu is a great example. He was able to rise up and bring what we would call a warrior nation. He used amazing techniques on the battlefield. One of his well-known techniques is the bull horns, and he had 5 major battles with Britain before finally falling. Some to mention are Walk's Drift, which is a very good battle, Alundi and Brinda Kula. Again, after they were defeated, it leads to their civilizations and their empires being absorbed into these European powers and being used in their future wars. So then that leads us on to the Napoleonic Wars. So if you look at that time period, do you know what wars were happening during that era? And you remember, before the Napoleonic Wars, what was the climax of Europe?
It was a war. I don't remember, you always at war.
It pretty much was. So in that period we had the French Revolution happening, we had the American Revolution happening, and we also had the Haitian Revolution happening. And if you look at it from an African perspective, we have Africans taking part in all these wars. Of course the Haitian Revolution was ours, that was us breaking free from European powers. But within the American Revolution, they were drafting in African slaves, promising them freedom for taking part. So that was also a way of getting them into it, and as well as the French Revolution, they would pull from their regiments that they had conquered, like we were speaking about before, Burkina Faso. They were pulling these soldiers to fight for their wars also. So we're aware that Africans are fighting in these wars, but they're not spoken about. So I'm going to touch on the Trafalgar, the Battle of Trafalgar. So this took place on the 21st of the 10th, 1805, and this was in Spain, in Cape Trafalgar. It's recorded, because you know Britons, they like to record everything, 33 ships for the British, 15 ships for the Spanish, and 18 for the French. And recorded in their muster books, they had 18 men who were born in Africa, and 1 man born in the Caribbean. We have a specific man called George Wyatt, who was 23 at the time, and unfortunately he was discharged at the age of 32 due to injury. And this was an honorable discharge. So we have these Africans taking place, and these are recorded in their records, which they can't hide. Yeah. The next war we have is the Battle of Waterloo. You all heard of the Battle of Waterloo. So on the 18th of June, 1815, this is in modern day Belgium, it was a victory for the coalition. They were able to bring together their resources to conquer the French in this. And we have Africans present in larger numbers in actual regiments. So you would have regiments at the time that were typically known for being black regiments. So examples of this are the 13 Light Dragoons, we've got the 10th Hussars, and we've got the 88th Foot. So these are well known, exactly. Yeah, so they would work, they would have different roles. They would have musicians, there would be foot soldiers, there were some people that rose up to colonel level as well. So it really varied. And then, as we're standing here in this lovely corner, I'm sure we've all taken a look already?
No, they're
No? Oh, okay. So I'm going to ask you.
It's not this side, it's the other side.
Yeah, so are we going to stay here?
Jay, show us, go. Show us it to us.
Yes, let me
Show us. What people don't realise about this painting, this is Victoria's thing, this is the Nelson flagship. Nelson has just died, you can see him dying there. This scene never happened like this. Never happened like this. This is a glorification. This is a glorification of the death of a great man. The death of a great man. And what you're looking at here, look at this. This is Jesus coming down from the cross. That's what it's based on. This is history painting. This is the artist. He's bigging up Nelson because Nelson was he defeated Napoleon and paved the way literally for Britain to rule the waves for the next century. And we celebrate Nelson by putting him at the top there and all that stuff. What other people don't tell you? One third of Nelson's fleet was foreign. A third. There came from all, there was even Frenchmen in his fleet. And there was black people. We know there's black people on there. There was at least 123 in his fleet. At least 19 of them were, we definitely think were black, because it said, okay, they didn't list ethnicity. What they listed was from Jamaica, from Guinea. So from that we infer that they were black. And this guy at the edge here, well, we don't know his name, but we do know there was a James Weir, John Weir, on the Victory. So there was a black man born in Africa on Nelson's flagship Victory. It always challenges me because this scene never happened, but artists have fabricated over the years. You see the same scene with the white guy with the gun and the black guy on the edge. The black guy's on the edge. So what's the black guy doing there really? Some people argue that this is a way of showing how the black guy was the faithful retainer, that the guy who was there, always there for you, that kind of relationship. But because I talk about this is where you see slavery in action here. Because this is 1807. Because this is 1805. Slavery, the trade wasn't abolished until 1807.
RSK, let it play, boy.
Ask you guys, what can you? I know it's sunny, tonight, but can you spot a brother? A brother.
Yeah, right there in the corner.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna try.
Why is also one?
Sorry. Well, we were doing a minority in regards to how many numbers there. If we consider how things are, there's one there. We are still the minority in a European Union, even though we've been around for a very long time. Where not all of them take up same thing, they didn't take up the majority of the country. So this is a perfect example. This is when Nelson was shot by a French sniper, and this was, I can't remember what his name, it was depicted by Martin to capture the moment. So he was forced to sleep right over there. There we go. Thank you. He wasn't on the right hand side. There we go. He wasn't forced to fight the African in, but he was commissioned to capture the moment. And within that moment, so that's a training project or process of diversity. This is just as it was. We had Africans taking part in these wars, just as you had Europeans, and just as you had Americans, people all across the world. So, in the midst of their history. They can't hide certain things, even though they may present it in ways that almost make us invisible. So you have to do a little bit of digging. corner, and you'll see that Africans are present in European history and are always part of the past. Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Now, the other couples have got a really good point. One of the first black boxers that arrived in this country is a guy called Bill Richards. Right? And what black from around the corner, what he actually did at this spot. So, find out about Bill Richards. Yeah, and he was one of the first black celebrities. No, the first celebrity. He's the one that wears the big coats, the chinchilla. He did the whole shebang. And he's the only person to bring a different style of boxing. Yeah, this was 18. Yeah, I'll get it there. Yeah, so I did. It started off as a slave.
Then sold to Norway. And Northumberland, just been up there. Yeah. Then brought him over here, taught him how to read and write, and then gave him his freedom. And then basically that's how he became a boxer. So he set up a ring right here. What you don't know.
So we're gonna start going towards